What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here with Cheesehead TV with your Packers Daily Chat, wherever you are on the internet. Hope we're finding you where you are, because we are all about your needs, Green Bay Packers fans worldwide. Coming to you on Wednesday afternoon. People already populating the chat. It's crazy how you guys always show up. It's good to see. Always happy to have you. The Packers have started their draft preparations. The scouts from across the country have descended on Green Bay. The construction of the big board has begun. Obviously, that's an ongoing process. Free agency yet a couple weeks away. The Combine will be here in a little over 2 weeks. I'll be in Indianapolis. Hope to give you guys a bunch of great content while I'm there. Speaking of content, if you haven't yet, you saw possibly on Twitter last night and or this morning that I dropped the return of Nagler's Never Right, my podcast, exclusively for patrons of our Patreon page. So if you haven't jumped on board and you want a little extra content from Cheesehead TV, please, always welcome at the Patreon page. $5 a month to support everything we do. And hello to everybody. Everybody chiming in. Hillary asks, if LaFleur turns things around, especially the offense, is McCarthy much different than Jeff Fisher? Yes, a whole lot different. Won a lot more games, won a championship, was on the precipice of a second Super Bowl if certain backup tight ends do their job on an onside kick. Yes, Mike McCarthy is very different than Jeff Fisher. It's pretty silly and reductive to ask, actually. So B.J. Raji returned this offseason, right? Count on it. Mock drafts are dumb, but everyone I read has us taking polite. I'll probably have to say this a bunch more times as we go on throughout the offseason. Mock drafts in and of themselves are fine. They're a conversation starter. They're not actually ever going to predict what actually happens on that Thursday night when the draft kicks off. But they're something to talk about, and they serve a purpose. And polite has been a name. The Florida lineman, edge defender, is somebody who has been mentioned quite a bit as a possibility for the Packers at 12. The idea that the Packers have to draft an edge at 12, I think, is a little misleading. I don't think there's any one position that any NFL GM is going to sit there and say, we have to get this position come hell or high water. That's when the Jamal Reynolds of the world end up getting taken. I do think clearly they will break down their board in tiers, and they will have people that they believe are worth that pick at 12. Their tiers at all the positions. Clearly, I highly doubt that they will look at quarterback at 12. All those crazier things have happened throughout history. But I think obviously edge will take precedence. If there is a guy there they think that is worthy, that has a grade that kind of equals out to what they consider a, upper echelon / blue chip player, which is what you would hope to get at 12. But it doesn't always fall that way. If there's a run on edge rushers right before 12, and they're stuck with either the lower end of the top tier or the top end of the second tier, I don't think they're going to necessarily force the pick. But this is all very, very preliminary and very, very early. Let's get to the Combine. Let's see how these guys test out. I think that will kind of shake some of this stuff out, especially with the logjam of guys at the top. But will they weigh considerations towards edge? You have to think so. Why can't we use Cobb like Edelman is used? Well, David, they could, except Cobb won't be on the team next year, most likely. And also, I think Edelman's a bit more explosive of an athlete than Cobb is at this point in his career. Cobb is resourceful and Cobb is a good player, but Edelman's on another level when it comes to shiftiness and just pure explosiveness as an athlete. Aaron hasn't endorsed the new head coach publicly. Sure I have. Oh, you mean Aaron Rodgers. Maybe being paranoid, but just seems like Aaron wanted the change. Now he's waiting to accept the change at his leisure. Chris, he's been on vacation. This is the problem with the 24-hour news cycle and Twitter and everything being so immediate. The dude's been living a life. He's golfing this week. Before that he was in New Zealand, he was in Australia. They've spoken on the phone. They've said they both have indicated they've spoken. Can we just chill about this whole Aaron Rodgers hasn't talked about the coach? I keep hearing this. I keep getting emails about it. I've got it on Twitter, and I've got it in the chat. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything that he hasn't said something publicly. He will eventually. And when he does, I'm sure that will be blown up, and Pro Football Talk will run with it and try and dissect it into something it isn't, much like they did today with the recycled quotes from Forbes, from KGB and Jermichael Finley. Who the hell is Dov Kleiman? Kenny, that's a great question. He's an internet personality, someone who is on Twitter as an alias, clearly not a real human being, as far as that's nowhere near close to whoever is running that account. That is not their real name. But it's someone who's clearly a huge Tom Brady fan. Maybe it's a Brady family member. Maybe it's his wife, like we had with the Sixers and their GM. But yes, that is not, whoever that is, that's an Anon name. Edelman is only good because of the roids. That's silly. Does a position of need make a player higher graded to a team? Scott, not necessarily, and actually you would hope that it doesn't. You want the evaluations to be kind of done in a vacuum, set your board, and then when it's time to make the pick, you've got all the information, so you've kind of made it a dispassionate decision. Now, you know, GMs and personnel people will tell you that's the way they want to operate, but they also tell you that, yes, sometimes need can trump what the board says. The most obvious example of that is back when they made the transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense, and B.J. Raji was sitting there, and they had Michael Crabtree rated higher on their board, but they took Raji because they needed a centerpiece transitioning to a 3-4 defense. So need will sometimes trump what the board says, but only ever so slightly, and only in what you would hope are extreme circumstances, such as a major scheme shift. Do you like Grossi? Do I? Grossi Posse. In the house, yes, I like Grossi. Tom Grossi is the man. I love Tom. He's awesome. And in fact, I'm going to have Tom. I want to get Tom on my podcast. What can be done about Rodgers' trust issues? Nothing, Katie. He is who he is. He's gotten this way by having those trust issues. He's won 2 MVPs by having trust issues. He's won a Super Bowl MVP by having trust issues. I think a lot is made about it, and it's understandable now because they've gone 2 years of really disappointing results. He's had, for his previous standard, a down year at quarterback. But look, you know, Rodgers has been an absolute Jedi having those trust issues. That is part of what makes him who he is and what made him into one of the great quarterbacks we've ever seen play the game. Yes, it can be frustrating. I am a card-carrying member of the Frustration Academy, no doubt about it. But you always have to step back and remember, it's much like when he's taking those sacks in a game and you get frustrated because he's holding onto the ball. Sometimes you got to take some of that because you know for every couple of those, there's going to be a huge play at some point in the game. At least that's the way he used to operate. But, you know, the trust issues thing, I think so much is being made out of it this week because of the quotes from Finley, from KGB, from a few other people throughout this past week. I think it's all way, way overblown. You know, it's the Finley thing especially. You mean Rodgers expects guys to run the right routes in practice? Newsflash. You know, of course, Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, they take it, they blow it up, and it becomes a narrative. But again, it's part of the off-season grind where we've got to create content day in and day out. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, websites latch onto and make into a story. When really, you know, that's been part of Rodgers' DNA his entire time in Green Bay as a starter. You know, and if that was part of who he was while we were celebrating him, it's going to be part of who he is, you know, during his downturn, which is hopefully brief and coming to an end in 2019. Do you value an athletic inside linebacker or edge? For me, it would obviously be edge. I think just because of the dearth of talent they have at that spot on the roster. Now, that said, if somebody like Devin White is there at 12 and they have a higher grade on him than any of the edge players remaining on the board, I'd take White in a heartbeat. I think he would really help transform that defense. Pairing him with Blake Martinez, and I've seen some people posit the idea that they have to replace Martinez if they take White, and I think that's completely ridiculous. I think putting them both on the field would be dynamite and would really kind of give Mike Pettin a lot of opportunities to kind of mess with offenses. I mean, some of the best defenses you see in the NFL have interchangeable parts inside where, offensive coordinators and quarterbacks can't really take advantage in a way they can when teams are having to scheme things up and move guys in and out all the time because they're trying to match up with offenses. If you've got a guy like Devin White, you can use him in any number of ways, and you're not running guys in and off the field declaring what you want to try to be doing on defense by looking at your personnel. So, yeah, overall I think edge is probably more valuable, but there are instances like White that I think that would make sense at 12. Katie, that's so nice of you to say. Thank you. Thanks for showing up and enjoying the chat and chiming in. Thanks so much for being here. How many picks do the Packers really have to hit on this draft to make enough of a difference? It's an interesting question. I would say they probably need to find at least one immediate contributor, and I mean day one, walk on the field, week one, day one, and make a difference. And, that sounds like not a lot, but, for rookies coming in, day one contributors, it's rare that you find somebody later in the draft. It's got to be that guy in the top half of the first round. I would think that that number 12, you would like to see a guy who could step in and contribute immediately. Past that, if they can get guys who, traditionally in Green Bay, they haven't gotten guys on the field right away. They've brought them along. Obviously, they have a new staff in place now, so maybe that philosophy changes. But, the league is littered with teams that have made drastic jumps, both in style of play and in the record, the win-loss column, because they've gotten contributions from rookies early on. So I would say at least one immediate contributor and probably 3 or 4 guys who are going to contribute along the way and then grow as the season progresses. Let's head over to Twitter, shall we? Got a few questions on the old tweet machine. Stefan starts us off with, hi, Aaron, do you see extended playing time for Aaron Rodgers in preseason due to the new scheme and the play calling? That is an excellent question, and it's something that can only be answered in time by the new head coach and Aaron Rodgers. The thing is it sure seemed, for all of the talk about the disconnect between McCarthy and Rodgers, this is one subject that they seem to agree on pretty adamantly. Rodgers was pretty, I don't want to say aloof about it, but he sure was dismissive about the idea these last couple years about needing to play in the preseason. Now, maybe that is because he had been in the same system for 13 years or 12 years. Now he's in a new system, going to have some new faces to be working with. Logic dictates, right, that he would get on the field a little bit more in the preseason. But we'll see. There is still a monster investment that you're throwing out there in a meaningless football game. Maybe they continue to err on the side of caution. But I would tend to think that, yes, he would have to get out there for a considerable amount more series than he has in the last 2 years in the preseason. I was just looking at the AAAF. Hey, Justin, yes, the Alliance, American football, I'm all in. Rosters for all the teams. There's an alarming amount of players who spent time in Green Bay during the 15, 16, and 17 seasons. Not a ringing endorsement for the Ted Ball era. I mean, look at the guys today who it was reported that earned the performance escalators in their salaries. Blake Martinez, Kyler Fackrell, and somebody else who I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but those are all from the 16 draft. So it's not like the 16 draft was a complete wash. That said, yes, there are a number of guys who are out of the league now who are trying to make their way in the AAF, but, I don't look at that as some kind of reason to flog Ted and Russ. It's been talked about ad nauseum about the lack of roster depth they have because of the drafts and free agent decisions that were made throughout that part of their tenure. The idea that there are guys still, playing professionally in another league, I think that at least portends that maybe those guys stick around a couple more years and maybe they make their way back to the NFL. It's the way it used to work in NFL Europe. So, yes, a lot of unfortunate decisions made throughout that tenure, but that part of their tenure, no doubt about it. I have a pipe dream that the Packers will trade up for Josh Allen. That man will transform a defense. What price would it take to trade up that high? P.S. The Last Jedi was an abomination. There's a lot going on there, Thomas. First of all, I'll hit on the Last Jedi thing real quick first, because look, Last Jedi, I didn't enjoy it, but my oldest daughter, it made her into an insane, obsessed fan. It's not for us anymore, dude. You know, they're catering to a whole new crowd now. That said, yeah, I couldn't stand a lot of it. I liked the story, I just didn't like the execution of a lot of it. As for Josh Allen and trading up, it would take a lot. Even to get from 12 up to what's looking like a top 5 pick would be necessary to get the kid. Now, again, this is all pre-combine. Let's see what happens when they measure and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But, man, getting up to go get Allen, obviously only Brian Gutekenst can tell us as far as what's in his mind and how he feels about the prospect, but it would take considerable amount of faith from Gutekenst, considering what he would have to give up, which I think would be significant, to jump up and get a guy who, as you say, maybe could transform a defense, but you've got to be completely sold in your soul that that is what you'll be getting. And hey, that's a rare thing. And if that's what Gutekunst sees on tape and feels he might have in that player, that prospect, after doing all the background work, talking to all the coaches, talking to all the trainers, all the people around him, etc., if they think, yes, he's worth that kind of investment, maybe Gutekunst pulls the trigger. But again, long way to go. Combine, let this draft process play out. We'll see what he has to say. Back to the live chat. What have the Packers ever in history had 3 first-round picks? What's the likelihood? Chris, I don't believe so. I don't know off the top of my head, but I don't think they have. I know the Raiders do, and I know it's very rare. But the Raiders do this season. Greer Martini is on the Salt Lake Stallions, man. Go Greer Martini. What a great name. Actually, and you know what? In defense of Greer Martini, I was surprised he didn't make the squad. I thought he contributed very well on special teams, and I thought they could have done a lot worse from scrimmage. Pour one out for Greer Martini. Ted is Snoke confirmed. That's great. Nice if there's some sort of rush on quarterbacks this year too. Drop someone nice to us. It would be nice, but I don't see that happening. I don't. This quarterback class, I don't love it. Still, again, it's early, and who knows what happens with the kid who might play baseball, etc. A lot going on there. With Cobb off the books, do they need another veteran receiver? Kind of feel like it's just Adams and promising talented young guys. Anton, I agree. I do think there's a good possibility they look at free agency. They dipped their toe in that water last year, trying to get Robinson and Watkins. Yeah, I would think, yes, they will look at that market. Interestingly enough, you look at the talent behind Adams, and there's a lot of, like you mentioned, there's a lot of talent, a lot of promise there. But man, there ain't a whole lot of snaps in the league. I mean, outside of Geronimo, who will be coming back from a pretty significant injury. I think they would be more than fine going into the season with Adams at 1, Geronimo at 2, and then rotating everybody else. Maybe MVS and Geronimo battle it out for that 2 spot. I do wonder if they bring in, like you say, Cobb off the books, if they go and do look at some slot options in free agency. We should sign AB and instantly trade him for an all-star right guard. Josh, you are playing some serious Madden GM right there. I salute you. Aaron, do you have a favorite draft prospect at this point? Timmy, no, not yet. I won't really dive. I've been diving in a little bit, but I won't dive in heavy until we get to that. Until we get to the combine. Right now, I'm doing a lot of surface work. I'm just trying to touch as many prospects as I can. I'm trying to get familiar with as many as I can. Once the combine rolls around, then I'll really go and look at 3 or 4 games of each guy that I think might be there in the first round, etc. Right now, there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of gathering of information, and I'm trying to talk to as many people as I can about each and every guy. Beasley or Cobb? Oh, give me Beasley. I love Randall, love what he's done for Green Bay, but I think Beasley could do some real damage in Green Bay with Rodgers. A lot of Cole Madison questions here, folks. Don't know, won't know. Next. Bring back Kuhn. If Gutekenst decides to spend money, what position would you like, safety or edge, maybe lineman, free agent? Thoughts? Well, Jesse, that's a good question because when you talk about edge and free agency, you can forget it. I mean, I know a lot of people have dancing visions of DeMarcus Lawrence and, Davion Clowney or D Ford dancing in their heads, but that ain't going to happen, man. Each and every year we go through this. We have this long list of potential free agents pass rushing in our dreams, and then all of a sudden, you get to right before free agency and or the time when tags can be applied, and all of a sudden all those names are gone. And they're either locked up on new deals or they're tagged. So I don't think that's why I think they have to address edge in the draft. And I think it's about time they do it early. But that's, for Gutekenst to decide. As far as, linemen, safety, man, Landon Collins would look really good in green and gold. The more I look at him, his game, how he might potentially fit with what Pettine likes to do, man, could you imagine Landon Collins? I think he'd be worth spending some coin in free agency. That's the one name that I think would make a lot of sense to maybe pony up a significant amount of your cap space for, try and get him. Outside of that, I don't see them really going out and swinging big at like offensive guard. I think they'll continue to do what they've done, is try and draft somebody and develop him, and or go get a second or third wave free agent to come and plug in. I do think they got to do a better job than plugging in Byron Bell, but we'll see how they attack free agency in that regard. Lacey should be big enough to play guard by now. You guys are ruthless. Would trading back from 12 be a better option with our lack of depth? Kevin, I don't think so. I think there's enough talent there at 12 that it makes a lot more sense to make the pick and get somebody who's, if not an outright difference maker, somebody who can contribute right away. Obviously they had that opportunity last year with Derwin James, and they decided to do exactly as you suggest, trade back, because they had a lot of holes to fill, and they got that extra first-round pick. Well, that's all great, but they still need a lot of talent, right? And they still don't have true difference makers on that side of the ball. They don't have like a field tilter. As great as Jair Alexander is, and I think he has a lot of potential to be a really good player in this league, he's not a field tilter. He's not a guy offensive coordinators are staying up at night trying to scheme away from or trying to figure out how to eliminate. I think they are a better defense with him on the field than off of it. I think his injury time last year when he was, not able to play, I think that proved out. I think Kevin King's the same way. I think both of them are talented guys, but neither one of them are shut down, set it and forget it kind of players where, like I said, offenses are having to completely change their game plan. Derwin James, he had the potential to be that kind of guy. And at 12, they could kind of get that kind of guy. Maybe not Von Miller style, but they could get somebody who offenses would have to at least worry about. And I think if you trade back, yes, you get a few more picks, but then once again, you're passing on the opportunity to get one of those types of players. That's just me. I've been saying it for years, and Lord knows Ted Townsend's been laughing at me, but I would much prefer, if the value's there, to make the pick. I've seen Noah Fant, tight end, Iowa, mocked to us a lot. I wouldn't be opposed to finally spending a good pick on tight end. Tim, I couldn't agree more. I've been begging for it for years. I tell you what, I've seen Fant, I've seen Hockenson at 12. Neither one of those. Fant at 30, or switch them. I don't care. Get me a tight end with talent who can do it all. He's going to open up a lot of things on offense. I don't hate it at all. I like Fant at 30. I think that'd be a great pick. We'll see how it plays out. Oh, Jeff Janis comments. I love it. Do you think Josh Jackson takes the next step this upcoming season? Bach, that's a good question. I got asked this on Twitter last night. I think the number one thing he needs to get fixed post haste is his tendency and his bad habit to grab guys downfield. He is a bad, handsy guy when it gets past the 5-yard mark. You saw it last year, not tons, but numerous penalties for illegal contact, for defensive holding. Those are automatic first downs. Those are drive extenders. Those are things that kill you. Those are things that end up with points on the board for the opposition. More than anything else, he has to fix that. Outside of that, I think he's got all the tools. I think he's got everything he needs to be a productive corner in the NFL. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be a 10-year starter in the league, but he's a guy who can contribute. He can be a sub guy. He can help you on the outside. He can rough up some of those bigger receivers. I don't think he's ever going to be able to turn his hips and fly with some of the burners in the league, but I don't think, again, like Belichick always says, tell me what he can do, and I'll put him in a position to do it. And I think, he's got a lot of good tools. He's big. He's got some ball skills. Put him in a position to be successful. If you ask him to play the slot or play some of these shifty-year wide receivers, he might get in trouble. But more than anything else, you've got to stop grabbing people downfield. He's got to do it. And if he can't learn, I don't know if it's the old boxing gloves of yore that they put on Ahmad Carroll, etc., but I don't know how you do what the coaches are going to do to try and correct it, but that to me is the number one thing he needs to eliminate. Unblock me on Twitter. I'll see what I can do. If Greedy falls to Green Bay, do we take him? Ooh, John, could you imagine? I can't rule it out. If he's the highest rated player on their board, I'd be surprised after they took two corners last year, but you never know. Kevin King's having trouble staying on the field. Maybe they feel the value is there. I'd be a little surprised, but it wouldn't totally shock me. Why so much Favre lately? I haven't mentioned Favre once in this video, but now I will because you brought him up. Brett Favre was awesome. That's why so much Brett Favre lately. I'm assuming you mean on my Twitter feed and on the website. Because you know why? Brett Favre was freaking awesome. And so many young fans forget he was the absolute freaking man. He won 3 MVPs in a row? You probably don't, because all you ever hear is, Favre threw all these interceptions, and Favre was a Viking, and blah, blah, blah. You know what? Before all that, before all the internet stuff happened, Brett Favre was the freaking man. And he threw some of the most insane touchdown passes the league has ever seen. And he completely turned around the fortunes of the Green Bay Packers simply by being awesome. So that, my friend, is why so much Brett Favre lately. Because I'll never let that memory die. Cheers. Which second-year undrafted player will make the jump? Give me Tony Brown, baby. I love that kid. I think there are a lot of possibilities there, but Brown is the man. I think he's got the tools to be a legit contributor. Maybe not a frontline starter, but he will be in the mix. I can't wait for the cap casualty part of free agency. Well, it kind of started already. We saw the Falcons release a couple people in the last 24 hours. You got to think a few more around the league are revving up this week. This is when it all starts. Do you think Crosby's job is in trouble? Good question, Jimmy. I don't think it's in trouble, but I do think they will look at their options in a kind of on the down low kind of way. Don't doubt they'll be looking at kickers in the draft and or around the league. Maybe Matt Bryant, who just got released, etc. But look, I've talked about it a little bit here in the past and on transplants. Crosby is, costs a pretty penny. He's one of the highest paid kickers in the league, especially when you look at his cap allocation. But for every missed kick, like the one at the end against the Cardinals or the catastrophic day he had in Detroit, for the most part, you look at him in the elements, when things turn bad in Green Bay in November and December, for the most part, traditionally, including this year, other than that Cardinals kick, he's been pretty darn good. And that's something that, has to be taken into account. Because you can look at the J.K. Scotts of the world who are booming punts in August, and then you get to December and they're booming 35-yarders. Making those kicks in those conditions, those are no gimmies, and they're really tough. And guys can be really good in domes and in other environments, and then all of a sudden they get on the cold and the ball's frozen, and then they kick it, and it's not the same game. So I think his ability there is probably what makes them go one more year, keeping him. But I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in some competition, if they bring in another leg. Maybe, they sell it like, oh, we just want to keep Mason, healthy / rested, don't want to overkick his leg, etc. But maybe they look at another possibility. And don't forget, J.K. Scott can kick off. He handled a lot of kickoff duties in camp and preseason. So, at this point, Mason is being kept around to make those kicks. He's got to make them. Do people forget how good Geronimo is? He's a solid number 2, and his chemistry with Rodgers is off the charts. Dude is a flipping gangster if he can stay healthy. Anthony, I tend to agree. You brought up the most important point, is his chemistry with 12. It's been there since his rookie year, and when he got on the practice squad as an undrafted free agent. But he's always where he's supposed to be. 12 trusts him implicitly, and that will go a long way. Now, that said, his athletic ceiling is limited. And, if MVS comes on in the offseason, then maybe that he takes over that number 2 spot. I think Geronimo's a solid player, but the upside, the athletically, is limited. And if there is an option out there in free agency that they think, that can come in and provide something that Geronimo and his younger guys lack, then I don't think they will. I don't think they'll hesitate. Geronimo is a good player. He's a fine player, but you're always getting better or you're always getting worse. You're getting better or worse on each side of the ball, and you can't stagnate. And if there's an opportunity to improve your wide receiver group, I think Gutekenst will take it. Why didn't Lewis play a lot last year? He was invisible. Bully, you'd have to ask Mike McCarthy. As the season wore on, I got the feeling that, Gutekenst went and got Lewis because he was available, and he was a really good blocker, really good longtime veteran player. And I think Mike had spent many years grumbling about not having lots of, veteran options brought in, etc. So Gutekenst found a deal, and he was he was out there forever. And you got him for a song at the end of free agency. So, why not? Yeah, bring him in. But I don't think McCarthy had a plan. I don't think McCarthy, had any real idea how to use him, how to utilize him. So I think that was a bit of a disconnect between the front office and the head coach. Now, I'm going to try and ask Gutekenst about that very thing at the Combine. He won't answer, of course, but I'd like to hear what he has to say. I don't see any way Earl Thomas doesn't end up in Dallas. Chip, I think you and the entire universe are on board with that one. It's like anything. God. Kevin, are the Bears really for real in your opinion? I feel like they had a lot of breaks with their schedule and injuries. Kevin, I think they're very, very talented. I think their defense will continue to be formidable. I think you're right. The schedule did line up favorably for them last year. But I think it all comes down to their quarterback, Mitch Trubisky. And can Matt Nagy get him to continue to mature and continue to grow and continue to improve? I'm not sold on it. I think he's got the accuracy issues that if we've seen anything in the league over the course of the last 20, 25 years, as the league has exploded as a passing league, accuracy is one area where it's really tough to improve. I mean, greatly. You can improve a little bit, but it's like Deshaun Kaiser. Deshaun Kaiser is basically the same guy he was in Notre Dame. Really athletic, can run around, can't hit the broadside of a barn. I think Trubisky's better than that, but game in and game out, he makes 3 or 4 throws that leave you scratching your head and thinking, this guy was the 2nd overall pick? It's just, that to me is their one stumbling block. I don't doubt Nagy, who is a very good coach. I think he proved that out throughout his first season in Chicago. Will do everything he can to mitigate what he asks his quarterback to do. I'm not going to say he's going to hide the guy. I don't think he's Blake Bortles level as far as needing to be hid, but I think he will do everything he can to simplify things and, minimize what he asks the quarterback to do. Because to me, they've got everything else in place. So, I think the Bears are going to be an issue. No doubt about it, at least for the foreseeable future. What are Cheesehead TV's plans for the Combine and the draft? Manuel, I could tell you that, but then I'd have to kill you. No, I kid. We will be at the Combine, or I'll be at the Combine. I'll be reporting from the Combine both here on my daily chats. I'll be on all the socials. I'll be doing a tweet up at some point. I have to set that probably on that Thursday night of that week. And then as for the draft, we're gonna blow it out, dudes. We're gonna be doing lots of live stuff, lots of analysis, lots of video. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And don't forget, the Cheesehead TV draft guide, which is in the works, will be out in a few weeks. So get ready for that. Get ready for all the stuff we do, and you can support it all. I'll say it once again at our Patreon page, Cheesehead TV, Patreon. Check it out. It's $5 a month to support everything we do. Will anything surprise you in the draft? Yes, Bully, if the Packers take a quarterback at 12. Do you think Mike Daniels will get back to the level he played in 2017? I'm interested to see that because, look, I don't think Daniels played poorly last year, but he certainly wasn't the same type of player we had gotten kind of grown accustomed to, right? And I do wonder how much of that is what he was being asked to do. Was Mike Pettin asking him to do different things than Dom Capers was? But you look at the one-on-ones, and you look at the lack of explosion, you look at the lack of kind of havoc, so to speak, that he created in the pocket, you do wonder. Now, obviously, his season ended with an ankle injury, and hopefully he's going to be coming back 100% right as rain. But it's definitely something that is one of the big questions to me. And I wouldn't be surprised. He's getting, towards the end of his deal. I wouldn't be surprised if they look at defensive end at some point in this draft for that very reason. McKenzie news, nothing that I've heard. Do they sign Mo Wilkerson? Chad, I think there's a good possibility. Obviously, with the injury happening so early in the year, you got to think he'll be ready to go April 1st when they report for off-season workouts. And who knows him better at this point than Green Bay and Pettin? And, obviously his first kind of weeks in the system there, I don't think he blew anybody's doors off. I wouldn't say he played poorly. I wouldn't say he was just a guy, but I would say he was just a cut above just a guy. I think he maybe would have rounded into shape as the year went on, but at this point, I don't see him getting a big deal anywhere else, or maybe even an offer anywhere else. So I think if he is going to be back on the field in 2019, you'd think it'd be in Green Bay, and you'd think they could get him for a pretty reasonable rate. We'll see. Packers should draft Devin White. We talked about that earlier. Whitney. Yes, we talked about that at the top of the video. If he's there at 12, I think that's a tough ask not to make that pick. I think he'd come in and light things up on the defensive side of the ball for the Packers. I don't think there's any doubt there. All right, everybody, I'm going to have to jump. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. They do fly by very fast. But hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up on email. I'm Aaron@cheeseheadtv.com. I answer as many as I can all the time. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much for checking out Cheesehead TV, supporting everything we do. I'll have another podcast up on Patreon probably tomorrow night. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll talk to you soon.